Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Falcons and the Bucs played a thrilling Thursday night game. Also, the Jets are looking to add Davante Adams, and a rematch for the national championship lacks luster.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
But of course, we got to start off with the brilliant performance from Kirk Cousins in Kirktober, kicking off Kirktober just right. 42 for 58 passing, 509 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. What we saw tonight from Kirk Cousins and his Falcons offense was the explosive offense that we were all hoping to see from Zach Robinson, from Kirk Cousins, from all of these weapons. 8 20-plus yard plays in this game. They had 10 in their first 4 games. They had 8 alone in this game. You got 2 from Kadero Hodge, of all people, including the game-winning 45-yard walk-off touchdown to get the Falcons the 36-30 overtime win. 2 from Darnell Mooney, 1 from Kyle Pitts, 1 from Drake London, 1 from Bijan Robinson, and 1 from Ray McCloud. So they were able to spread the ball around to their playmakers. This is, again, what we wanted from this offense. It felt like they were close last week, right? They had a couple opportunities, some deep shots. I broke it down on the extended All-22 review for the Locked On Falcons Insiders. Link in the description below if you want to join and check that stuff out. And it felt like, hey, man, if they can just start hitting some of these explosive plays, this offense is going to start clicking, even if it isn't perfect, even if it isn't the well-oiled machine. And they hit those in this game, and things are certainly looking up for this football team. Now, it wasn't perfect for the Falcons offense or the team. You know, it's going to be fun to go back and look through the film and see just kind of how razor thin some of these margins are. You know, some of these passes, these tight window throws that Kirk is fitting the ball in. Some of these passes where it's like, I don't know what's going on. You know, was that a good throw? Was that a good decision? All that sort of stuff. That's going to be fun to do. You know, it's one of the things that the Falcons struggled with tonight that has gotten a lot of, oxygen, that I was just kind of like, whatever, man. Like, penalties, right? Penalties really hurt the Falcons in this game. It felt like every time the Falcons got penalized, they got 8 penalties. I think the most they've had this season. It felt like every single one of those was at the wrong moment. And it was funny because, like, to me, like, I've seen a lot of people talk about penalties, and it's like, yeah, they've had some tough penalties, like the one last week that, wiped out a touchdown and whatnot. But it was one of those things where, like, they were in the bottom third in the NFL in terms of, like, being the least penalized team in the league. So it's like, to me, I'm looking at that stat and I'm being like, yeah, penalties have been a problem, but they haven't been as big an issue as they are for other teams in the NFL. And in fact, you've gotten off relatively lightly, basically being, I think, going into this night, being the 11th least penalized team in the NFL in terms of total penalties and yards. But tonight, it certainly reared its ugly head, sort of feeding that sort of narrative, whatnot. But the Falcons were able to prove resilient and overcome those issues. Again, so many times in this game, it felt like they should have lost the game. It just was a back and forth, uneven game, just little details that just, they didn't take advantage of every opportunity they had, but then they did, and so it was one of those crazy nights, right, where it just felt like a bad process, right? It was just like a bad process, but you got a great result, right? You missed the field goal, you block a field goal, you have questionable clock management, all those various things. You miss a couple opportunities in the red zone, and it's sort of the bad process, good results is kind of epitomized, right, by that quick slant they ran to Drake London with 12 seconds left. He catches it, gains 14 yards, gets tackled. They rush the line, they spike it with 1 second, like a fraction of a second. That game could have been costly, and we would have been sitting here eviscerating this coaching staff. This is the worst coach. Their clock management is terrible, all that stuff. We would have been going in on them off of 1 second. But hey, guess what? This is their identity, guys. They're a chaotic team. And speaking of chaos, we got to talk about the Kirk Cousins chaos meter. And of course, if you're unfamiliar with that, that is something that we have borrowed from Luke Braun, the host of the Locked On Vikings podcast. He has bequeathed the Kirk Cousins chaos meter to us. And there's 5 different levels of Kirk Cousins, right? Level 1 is the lowest level. This is where Kirk is too conservative for his own good. Level 2 is, hey, Kirk's out there, he's managing the game effectively. Level 3 is peak Kirk Cousins, where he's being a game manager, but there's just a little bit of chaos in there to get him to that peak level of performance. Level 4 is like, nope, this is too much chaos. Too much chaos with Kirk Cousins, and bad things happen. That's what happened in week 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then level 5 is like, this is so chaotic that it might be time that we dial up number 9, the southpaw. Give me the lefty out there. But this game clearly was a peak Kirk Cousins performance, a level 3 performance, because like, you look at that touchdown throw he threw to Darnell Mooney, right, where he kind of threw it in, like, was it double, triple coverage or whatever the case may be? Like, I get where Kirk was coming from, but, like, Darnell Mooney, the contested catch guy, like, that's not the throw that I would make to Darnell Mooney. That's a Drake London throw. That's a Kyle Pitts throw. But Kirk was like, no, I got my guy, Darnell Mooney. I'm going to layer it in there. And like I got some hits from the Locked On Falcons Insider. It was like, that was a level 4 Kirk Cousins chaos throw that had a good result. And so that's what we mean, where it's just like, you get the game manager Kirk, he's wheeling and dealing, just dial a little bit of that chaos in there, and it's like, that's where you get the peak version of Kirk Cousins. So the Falcons' identity is going to be this chaotic football team. Like, they are the embodiment of the Kirk Cousins chaos meter, where it's up and down, back and forth. It's not going to be clean.
Stay up to date on the Atlanta Falcons all year long by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Falcons on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, the New York Jets could be close to landing Davante Adams. Before we get to that, the Mets are advancing in the playoffs. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Creation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON, spelled LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Milwaukee Brewers were stunned at the last possible moment. The Mets, who were just a couple outs away from defeat, mashed a 3-run homer in the 9th to advance New York to the divisional round.
Wow. I am at a loss right now. It's funny, on this morning's show, I talked about how the first 2 games didn't really feel like the playoffs for me, because the Mets jump out to that early lead in game 1 of this series. Game 2, they have a lead. Everybody else is sweeping their wild card series, going the easy way. This Mets team, they need to travel the hard way, it seems like. They take the road that's a little more difficult, the road that's a little more stressful for fans. And I felt every single emotion of a playoff game tonight. Unbelievable what just happened. We all felt it. The season was over for a minute there. And it was devastating, and you were just trying to have the faith and try to keep it up and believe in the team. But, man, it got hard because the Mets just simply could not hit for most of this game. And Jose Quintana delivers an incredible performance to keep the Mets in it. 6 scoreless innings, as good as you can possibly imagine. You go to the bullpen, and the decision was Jose Budo. If the Mets lose, we would have talked about that till we're blue in the face. Why did you go to Budo? Edwin Diaz ends up coming in that inning. Why not just go to Diaz? David Peterson was available. Why not go to David Peterson in that spot? And I could say, hey, sure, Mendoza made a mistake. Jose Budo, I didn't even have the time to look up the numbers, but I do know for a fact that coming off just 1 day of rest, he has not been as effective this year. So you could have played that game. That would have been the topic of the show today as I was getting ready to do a really sad podcast. But it's not a sad podcast. The New York Mets are advanced to the NLDS. They will face off against the Phillies, and this is what I've been talking about on this show for a couple days now. It has felt like these 2 teams were on a collision course. The Mets get their season on track right before the London series. They had a dramatic victory there. And the couple series that they played against the Phillies leading into the end of the year, that final week, so dramatic. The Mets beating Zach Wheeler. It felt like we were about to get robbed of a series that we all wanted to see. I think even non-Mets fans, non-Brewers fans wanted to see.
The Atlanta Braves crawled into the playoffs and then promptly exited after getting thrashed by the San Diego Padres.
Well, the Braves season does come to an end, and I think most people probably would have predicted that coming into this series, although there's always a chance, there's always a hope. Look at what the Royals and Tigers are doing over on the other side. But it does come to an end, a 5-4 loss to the San Diego Padres, and give a lot of credit to the Padres. They're a great team. And we talked about it in our preview episode of this series. I think they're probably the most well-rounded team in the postseason right now, and certainly have a very good chance of winning it all when you look at just how deep their pitching staff is, although they got a little injury themselves to deal with at the moment with just Joe Musgrove leaving this game. But that bullpen is just so deep. They got 5-6 arms. They got arms they didn't really even have to use in these first two games that they could throw out there that are still really good. So it's a lot of arms, a lot of pitching the Padres have. And that lineup, I just think, is one that can have a lot of success in the postseason. They don't strike out a lot. They hit for average, but there's also some power in there too. Like you saw, guys like Tatis and apparently Higashioka, who just apparently does nothing but hit home runs against the Atlanta Braves in the postseason. So that Padres team is really good. You knew it was going to be a tough matchup for the Braves. It's an unfortunate one. We'll go back to that final day of the regular season, the extra day of the regular season. And, the Mets winning that first game, it was kind of up to them whether they were going to go play Milwaukee or go play San Diego. And look, we've talked about it. I think the Mets basically handed the Braves that second game. I don't think they wanted any part of going out to San Diego to place the Padres. Now they got their own situation to handle there in Milwaukee. That's the only series going to a game 3. But if you would have asked me, and you did ask me, who would I rather play? I would have said the Brewers. I think we're the better matchup for the Atlanta Braves. This Padres team's been the best team in baseball after the All-Star break. And like I said, I just think they're one of the more well-rounded teams left in the postseason.
Vikings quarterback Sam Darnold is on a revenge tour. Sam Darnold can continue his revenge tour this weekend when the Minnesota Vikings take on the New York Jets. Locked On NFL host Tyler Rowland guarantees a Vikings victory.
Now let's spin it to another team that has exceeded my expectations, and it's the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings, coming into the year, I'll admit, I was down on the Vikings. I saw Sam Darnold. I didn't like the pick of J.J. McCarthy. They lose Danielle Hunter. You don't know what you're really going to get from the team. Hawkinson out early. Addison has the, off-field issues. Like, I just did not see Minnesota coming out and doing what they're doing right now. But Sam Darnold has looked solid. I think people saying that he's playing great, maybe a little bit of an over-exaggeration, but the team is good. And now they get to go into the New York Jets and play a team in the Jets that I think is kind of reeling. Aaron Rodgers is banged up. You have Garrett Wilson talking about how the offense that they're running isn't doing some of the stuff that other offenses are doing. Michelle, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to say it. I'm going Joe Namath on the Jets. I guarantee, go to FanDuel, bet the money line. I guarantee you that the Minnesota Vikings beat the Jets this week. There is no way that Brian Flores against that Nathaniel Hackett offense that can't hack it. There's no way. Did you see that? That was a joke. That was all right. Anyways, I'm just guaranteeing that the Vikings slaughter the Jets this week.
The New York Jets find themselves in the middle of the Davante Adams sweepstakes. And here with me to talk about that is John Butchko, the host of Locked On Jets. And John, I know the Jets are going through a bunch of different things they're trying to work out on the field, but now there's this other added element. We know the connection between Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams from their time in Green Bay. It kind of seems like, this is the obvious destination that Davante Adams should be favored to go to, and he certainly is. But in your mind, is this the right decision? If the Jets do go forward with this, if Davante Adams does come to New York, do you think that's a worthwhile investment for the Jets to pursue?
I think it's complicated, and I think it's more complicated than a lot of people realize. Now, I think we all know one of the reasons the Jets, I think we all know the reasons the Jets are maybe the favorite to land Davante Adams right now, and that's his relationship with Aaron Rodgers. That's his chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. Adams was twice a first-team All-Pro with Rodgers throwing him the ball. He was, top 3 receiver in this league in Green Bay with Rodgers. There's chemistry there. And look, to put it bluntly, Aaron Rodgers is running the Jets right now. The Jets are doing everything Aaron Rodgers wants them to do. So I think the odds are very high Davante Adams ends up a member of the New York Jets. Is it the right move for the team? I think that's a more complicated discussion. Now, if it's the question is this going to excite the fan base? Big trade always excites the fan base. Is this going to get a lot of praise from the guys at ESPN and NFL Network and the back pages in New York and the sports talk radio in New York, WFAN? Absolutely. Would it improve the team? I think so, but I look at this Jets team right now, and a couple of things. First of all, 4 games into the season, this is just not a team that looks like a Super Bowl team. This was a team that was depending on a lot of older players to remain at the top of their game. And I don't know that that's happened at this point. Look, Aaron Rodgers is not a bad quarterback. I think if you watch him the first 4 weeks, with the one exception being the Week 3 game against New England, he has not looked like the top tier quarterback he was in Green Bay. He looks like a quality quarterback, but I think there's been some decline. Tyron Smith, they brought him in this offseason from Dallas. Guy's been one of the top left tackles in the league for a while. There's signs of decline. This Jets team's just not performing at a super high level. The defensive line is underperformed, and they've had injuries, and they have the Hassan Reddick holdout. I think this team, if they played 4 games, I think 3 of them they played poorly. They were blown out Week 1 in San Francisco. They were very fortunate to win Week 2 against Tennessee, and then a horrific home loss against the Denver Broncos. And this is the type of move you make if you think Davante Adams is the piece that puts you over the top.
Yeah.
And look, I think what happened Sunday in London against Minnesota, the undefeated Vikings, will tell me a lot about whether this move is worth pursuing. Because you beat the undefeated Vikings, then I could say, okay, fine, maybe this team's rounding into 4. Maybe the ceiling is really high for this team. But the Jets lose and the Jets look bad on Sunday. I don't know that really going all in buying is the right move for this team, especially talking about wide receiver. The passing game's had some struggles. Part of that's Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers haven't really been on the same page. Mike Williams is coming back from an injury, but I think you can expect both of those guys to get better as the season goes on. Wilson will develop chemistry with Rodgers. Williams really started to come on Sunday against Denver. The Jets have been increasing his snap count every game as he comes back from a knee injury. Looking at where the Jets should be prioritizing right now, I think that, the receiver situation has looked shaky the first couple of weeks, but there's a lot that suggests it's going to get better. And Davante Adams is going to be, it'll improve your receiver room. But how much? Do you really want to pay a high price for what he'll bring? I think Aaron Rodgers would say yes. I'm not so sure the answer is yes.
Yeah, for Aaron Rodgers, it's a no-brainer. But again, you have to look at it organizationally and say, well, if you lose this game, the Raiders are probably looking for a second-round pick plus, and where the Jets want to give up that capital in order to go get him, we'll see. But, John, you mentioned that Sunday morning, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time game. It's over abroad in London. Jets, Vikings. The Jets trying to stop the Vikings' undefeated streak. Davante Adams less for now, at least. But how do you feel like this Jets team matches up against the Vikings? And do you think they have a good shot to stop their undefeated streak?
I think it's going to be tough based on the way the Jets are playing. Like I said, they're 2-2. I think they've played 3 bad games. I think they played a great game against New England, but New England's one of the worst teams in the league. As I said, they beat Tennessee, but they should not. They were fortunate to win that game, and a horrific loss against Denver. In many ways, Minnesota plays the same style of defense as Denver. They disguise their looks up front. They blitz a lot. The Jets' offensive line did not do a good job with that. Look at the way the Vikings have played the first 4 weeks. They've looked really good. I think that a Jets victory requires 3 things. First of all, it requires the Vikings to not handle the London trip well. I think, as we all know, going across the pond to England, that could be an equalizer. That leads to some odd results. The second thing is, and I say this having watched the Jets for any number of years, having watched all of Sam Darnold's games his first couple of years in the league. Yeah. Off to a great start, but we know he's a mistake-prone guy. Can the Jets force some mistakes on him on the defensive side? Is this the game where maybe Sam Darnold falls back to earth? And third factor is Jets need to play better. This is not a team that's played up to its potential. It's not been a team that's played up to its hype so far. If they do, they can get a win. But I think that Denver game really rattled me. There are the games you lose where it's like, okay, that's you just had an off week. I worry that Denver game exposed some issues. Now we'll see Sunday. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe the Jets show up. And if, as I said, if those three things happen, maybe the Jets win. Maybe they get this thing back on track, and maybe we get to a situation where Davante Adams makes some sense for the team.
Stay up to date on the New York Jets all year long by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Jets on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, could the rematch of the national championship prove to be more entertaining this time around? Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet, and you can place that bet on some Week 5 line. The New York Giants and Dimes, are 6.5-point road dogs against the Seattle Seahawks. The Chicago Bears, who are still treading water 4 weeks into the season, are 3.5-point home favorites over the Carolina Panthers. That Bears defense is good, but it beats the Red Rocket good. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started. Michigan and Washington face off in a rematch of last season's national championship, and the game is lacking some juice. Both teams' championship rosters have been depleted, both head coaches have departed, and yet this year's game is expected to be better. Our Locked On Big Ten squad discusses.
I want to get everybody's comments on the rematch of the national championship with Michigan going out to Washington. Obviously, it's a rematch of laundry. Coaches are different. Players are different. Jacob, we'll start with you at the top. How do you see this game? Both teams have a lot in common. New head coach, new quarterbacks, new players. How's it going to work out? Washington's actually a slight favorite in this game.
Yeah, I know. That's what I saw. It's like 2.5, 3 points to our friends at FanDuel. I mean, I don't see how, especially with how they performed last week, right? It's just, I don't know. Michigan hasn't been overly impressive. I mean, a controversial call gives them a win over Minnesota, but I don't know.
They were up 24-3 in that game. They were fine.
Okay, but still, they still let Minnesota hang around and make it a game in the end. Like Michigan's an average team. Okay, they are.
Yeah.
And so with Washington, average, below average. I mean, probably below average. But what is this at home in Seattle? I'm going to take Michigan. I don't feel good about it, but I'll take them just because I think they're the better team. Question mark on that one though.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's an interesting little backstory, and Zach, my former Pac-12 brethren, RIP, might remember this as well.
Hey, not so much. You got Gonzaga coming, man. Don't worry. You're fine.
That's true. The good old Pac-12 is kicking around with Gonzaga and trying to sway everybody else. But I think for the interesting thing about this game, the last time a team from the state of Michigan ranked inside the top 11 came to Seattle, where Washington was favored as an unranked team with a first-year head coach who came from a Power 4 program at some point and who has a new transfer quarterback. Washington blitzed Michigan State, and it led to the downfall of Mel Tucker in East Lansing. That's all I'm going to say. There is a weird confluence of factors there. That's like 6 different things that line up almost perfectly, other than it was a non-conference game in 22, and now it's a classic Big Ten showdown.
All right, Zach from UCLA Bruins. He's talking some former Pac-12 here, Washington and Michigan. Your thoughts?
It's a weird game, right? Washington, they got Will Rogers, who threw for 300 yards, but they couldn't go beat Rutgers. I think after Rutgers, right, they had like the Big Ten leader rushing-wise. Michigan loves to run the football, right it down USC's throats. Letting Minnesota back in the game, I think they'll be more physical. I believe in Washington's future. I think Michigan can control the time of possession, hold possession, and just churn up yards on the ground to beat Washington.
If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we are here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, will the Minnesota Vikings improve to 5-0? So at least until tomorrow, stay Locked On Sports Today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.